Welcome back to the FPL video and podcast. This will be my team selection for Game Week 1, and it's not 100% locked in, but you can see my final squad during the deadline stream on Friday. Be sure not to miss it by smashing the like button of this video, getting it to over 300 likes, and subscribing to my channel. We're looking to push on towards 30,000 subscribers. All your support throughout the summer has been massively appreciated, as I covered Euro Fantasy, FPL, and very soon UCL Fantasy will be back on this channel. And if you want to see an updated lineups video and podcast, be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Picking a goalkeeper and sticking with him has been very difficult, but Jordan Pickford is right up there as one of the very best in this position. At this time last year, I talked about skipping Jordan Pickford, and Everton started very poorly, but then as the season gradually went on, Jordan Pickford was a very solid choice, and Everton kept the second most clean sheets in the Premier League, only behind Arsenal and David Raya. So whilst the likes of Ryan Allison might get more FPL points if they stay fit and play every single game, I think Jordan Pickford is still going to be very competitive, and he also saves you 0.5 million. Now, Raya is still consideration for me, but one deciding factor in going for Jordan Pickford is the quality of fixtures. Everton are top of the fixture difficulty rating until Game Week 14, which is in early December, whilst Arsenal have some very tough games in the opening 5, facing Aston Villa, Tottenham and Man City, all away from home. So Jordan Pickford, whilst he does have a few tough games in the opening 4, the long-term fixtures make up for it, and I think he's going to get a lot of FPL points in the process. I would highly recommend going for one Liverpool defender, and Trent is the ideal pick. Despite being the most expensive defender in the game at 7 million, he has suffered a price decrease from last season, so he's more attainable this time round. And with Liverpool's opening fixtures, I think he's certainly worth investment. But if you want a cheaper option in this position, then Quansah at 4.5 million offers a great choice. He might not start every single game, but he should be Virgil van Dijk's main centre-back partner, and Konate, of course, is another one with so much potential. But I think Quansah has the nod for at least the beginning part of this season, and Andrew Robertson should start consistently, but Game Week 1 is a bit of a doubt for him, as he hasn't featured much in pre-season. And neither has Trent, to be fair, but he was in the starting 11 for Liverpool's main team in the 4-1 win over Sevilla, where he got an assist for Diogo Jota, whilst Robertson played in the B team against Las Palmas on the same day in a 0-0 draw. But I think all of those options would be good. Virgil van Dijk for the goal threat, but I think Trent just has the bonus points, the assists, the occasional goal, and he'll start most games for Liverpool, despite Conor Bradley being a very promising right back. But my second defender is Joachim Andersen. He's a very template 4.5 million defender, and we are stacked and blessed in this position and price point. But I don't think Brentford away is a great fixture necessarily, but the opening games for Crystal Palace are quite good, and Joachim Andersen is underpriced considering the fact that Mitchell, for example, is 5 million, and Joachim Andersen can really compete with him. And he's also 0.5 million cheaper. He can score a few goals per season, get a few assists, and the bonus points is something that Joachim Andersen isn't a stranger to. So he's a very good choice in the long term. But for Game Week 1, I might reshuffle my defence a little bit and either drop Joachim Andersen to the bench or avoid him for now and invest in the Crystal Palace defender later down the line. But my third and final defender is Lewis Hall, who is a mega differential. He didn't get many FPL points last season, but I expect him to be the main left back for Newcastle this season, and I think Trippier will be the main right back. Livramento can rotate with both of them on either side, and I know some people might say Lewis Hall is not nailed on whatsoever and he's a very risky pick, but I like him for the opening 4 game weeks of the season, and I think he'll get over 25 starts in this Premier League campaign. Southampton at home is a great fixture when Newcastle can keep a clean sheet, but an alternative for me is either going for Dan Burn or covering them defensively with Nick Pope in goal. If possible, I would go for 2 or 3 Liverpool players and at least one attacker. Mohamed Salah is the top pick, but Diogo Jota is much cheaper and offers great value whilst he can stay fit, and that's the biggest issue with him. He is very injury prone, and you just have to hope he can stay fit for a very long time. And Darwin Núñez as well as Cody Gakpo offer great competition at the striker position, and Diogo Jota can also play on the left, but I don't think he'll start week in week out or get 90 minutes, which is something you want to see from your main FPL assets. But I think Diogo Jota will be the main starter for the first few game weeks of the season, and if he can stay fit and if he's firing on all cylinders, maybe he can keep his spot for 6 game weeks or beyond, which would be ideal for those that start with Diogo Jota in Game Week 1. Next up is Bukayo Saka, who has been incredible in the last 2 Premier League seasons with double digits in goals and fantasy assists, and I think he can do even better this time round and easily surpass over 200 FPL points. And we are blessed in terms of how many great players we have in the midfield. You can go to Phil Foden in a couple of weeks' time once he's back and starting games consistently for Manchester City. He costs 9.5 million. Cole Palmer is also at a similar price, as well as Heung-min Son. So you can easily switch between these premium midfielders, and even Kevin De Bruyne could be another shout. Bruno Fernandes, Martin Odegaard. But I think Saka is right up there as one of the best midfielders in the game. I'd probably put him in the top 3. Check out my best midfielders video and podcast to see how I rank every single one of them. But Saka is definitely a great way to cover the Arsenal attack alongside Kai Havertz up front. My third midfielder is Eze, who is another template pick to be fair, but I like the opening fixtures and Eze has a very high ceiling. We could see fewer double-digit hauls because of the departure of Elise, but once Mateta comes back into the starting 11 following his duties with the French Olympic squad, I think that combination between Eze and Mateta can still work wonders, and I could see Crystal Palace getting off to a flying start. They've had a decent pre-season, and since Oliver Glasner was appointed a couple of months ago, they have been on fire, and only a handful of teams have been better in the Premier League. But my final midfielder in the starting 11 is Anthony Gordon, who has a tremendous home record, but there are plenty of away fixtures in the opening 5, so I'm not entirely sure about him just yet. He's another one that's probably going to be a short-term pick, so I need to be careful with this. I'd also want to go for a medium to long-term balance, so the foundations are set for a couple of months. One differential I'm very confident about is Chris Wood for at least the first 3 game weeks of the season. Those are fantastic games for Nottingham Forest, but afterwards it's Liverpool away in game week 4 and things get tougher from that point onwards. But I still like Chris Wood. He can remain a good option who can rotate with your 5th midfielder, so to speak, if you're going for that sort of structure. So I think Chris Wood is definitely worth investment, but Manice might be a safer pick in the long term as Fulham have better medium to long term fixtures on the horizon. You've also got Joao Pedro, who's 5.5 million, but Chris Wood still remains a good option. He'll start week in, week out, and I think he's a good way of covering the Nottingham Forest attack, arguably the best, even over Morgan Gibbs-White, Elanga and Hudson-Odoi. But my second striker is Erling Haaland, and going for him makes it difficult to invest in other areas, to be fair. He costs 15 million this time round, but he scored a hat-trick against Chelsea not so long ago, only around 2 weeks ago at this point in a pre-season friendly. He also got a couple of goals against them at Stamford Bridge last season, and he can do the same thing in game week 1. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a goal fest, and having no Chelsea attackers whatsoever does leave me a bit worried between game weeks 2 to 8, but my structure is quite flexible in my opinion, where I can switch between certain players like Diogo Jota to Nkunku, to name one example, or even Anthony Gordon or Eze. But I have to say, Erling Haaland is still the best manner of covering Man City offensively until Phil Foden comes back. Then you've got a bit of a battle on your hands, and you can go without Erling Haaland, don't get me wrong, but for the first few gimmicks of the season, I might go for the Norwegian and then downgrade him to an Ollie Watkins and start investing in other areas. Maybe Mohamed Salah can be brought into the midfield, or Cole Palmer. So I'm quite open-minded about how I tackle the opening portion of this season, but Haaland is a great option even in game week 1, and you look at that game week 2 fixture against Ipswich Town, I think you could get a very high score in that match alone. But my third and final striker is Isak, who faces Southampton at home. He was a flat track bully and his home record speaks for itself, so Isak is one of the best forwards in the game. Ollie Watkins might have something to say about that, but there is a chance he doesn't start in game week 1 as he hasn't featured in pre-season whatsoever, whilst Isak has scored across multiple games. Now in my starting 11, I'm very happy with it for the first few game weeks of the season, but there are a few issues or potential problems. So for example, Chris Wood, opening 3 fixtures are fantastic, but beyond that, they get a bit tougher and that might require a bit of a change. Diogo Jota is injury prone, so he might not be the most reliable long-term pick. Anthony Gordon has a lot of away games, and typically, at least based on last season, he does very well at home, but very rarely produces an away return. Now, I think he's going to balance that more this season, so he'll probably do a bit worse at home, but still manage to improve upon his tallies in away matches. Then you look at Eze, for example, another injury-prone player. Isak has picked up his fair few of problems during his time at Newcastle, and Lewis Hall isn't the most reliable of picks, so to speak. So it's not a perfect squad, and I'll be showing you my bench very soon, and there are some good options in there, but it's not going to be the strongest bench you'll ever see. But I have to say, for a team selection, I'm still quite confident with this, and it wouldn't surprise me if I made no changes during the deadline stream, but it is possible. As I said, this team is not 100% locked in. But let's now go on to the bench and discuss the captaincy. I have changed my 4 million goalkeeper several times now, and Bentley is the latest one I've gone for. He has started 3 of the 4 preseason friendlies Wolves have played, but I still think Jose Sarr will be between the sticks against Arsenal away. Then Morgan Rogers is first on my bench. Now, I am considering a move to a 5.5 million option like Emil Smith-Rowe, but it would require a downgrade elsewhere, maybe Chris Wood to Joao Pedro, or I go from Anthony Gordon to Nkuku. But second and third on my bench are Barco and Robinson. So I believe I've got decent squad depth and not too many benching headaches, so to speak, and I'll probably go for it based on fixtures. But sometimes you get these weird FPL returns and you can't really foresee all the possibilities, and you'll get some things wrong. There will be bench points no matter how you set up your team. But I'm very happy with this squad, and I think it can do very well, not just for the first 4 game weeks of the season, but potentially beyond. Despite some teething issues, Barco's another one who could drop to the bench once Estupiñán returns from injury. But let's now discuss the captaincy, and at the moment, I'm looking at Saka as my vice, whilst Isak gets the armband. If I had Salah, he would be my top captaincy pick, and even Diogo Jota as well as Erling Haaland have crossed my mind. There are plenty of captaincy choices within my starting 11. Even Trent can't be discarded, Chris Wood and Anthony Gordon, but I'm going to keep it simple. One of Isak, Haaland or Saka will get the captain in Game Week 1 should I stick with this team, but Mohamed Salah could still come back into the fray, and if he does, he would be my number 1 pick for the captaincy, considering his record against newly promoted clubs, his Game Week 1 record, which is staggering, and also it's Mohamed Salah. He is one of the best FPL assets of all time. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Who are you going for the captain, and which problems or 50-50 calls are you having with your 50-man squads? We're all having them, and it's perfectly natural, especially once we approach the Game Week 1 deadline. But let me now show you a few different sites to discuss other factors with my FPL team. It's important to look ahead to future game weeks as well, so if you have the time, I'd highly recommend using a website like FPL.Team to see how your squad would look like in Game Weeks 2, 3 and beyond. You don't have to go all the way to Game Week 38, of course, because things change. You'll play wildcards, play different chips, and things change week on week with injuries and suspensions. But I think looking at Game Week 2 and 3 gives you a clearer picture of how your 50-man squad will look like. So Jordan Pickford would be in goal away to Tottenham in Game Week 2. That doesn't fill me with confidence. My back three would be Joachim Anderson, Hall and Trent, all with home fixtures, and that looks very solid, but my choice of goalkeeper doesn't look great for Game Weeks 2 and 4. As for my midfield, I'd go for Saka, Diogo Jota, Gordon and Eze. A few of them have home fixtures, but Saka's away to Aston Villa. That's not sensational, and Arsenal have struggled against them last season. Anthony Gordon away from home. Whenever that's the case, you're less confident of a return, but as I mentioned, I think he'll improve upon his tallies in these away matches. Erling Haaland would, and Isak up front looks very strong. Haaland as the captain is a no-brainer, but sometimes no-brainers result in missed opportunities, and you do get some big surprises from time to time. But my bench would be Bentley, Robinson, Rogers and Barco. I could feasibly start Robinson, to be fair, but I'm quite happy with this setup as well. And the expected points does drop from Game Week 1 to 2, but it's still fairly competitive and can do very well in Game Week 2. Then when we look at Game Week 3, I'm not going to go all the way to Game Week 4 and 5, for example, because that's going to be looking too far ahead. But in Game Week 3, I'd have Jordan Pickford in goal at home to Bournemouth, a back three of Joachim Anderson, Hall and Trent, and this is where I can start to make some more substitutions. So Robinson can come in, and I'd probably bench Lewis Hall or Joachim Anderson here, and I think at the moment I'd bench Lewis Hall. The midfield four would be Saka, Diogo Jota, Gordon and Eze. I know Tottenham at home looks difficult, but Anthony Gordon got a double-digit haul last time out, and I'd never bench him when he's in a home match at St James's Park. The front three speaks for itself. Haaland, Wood and Isak. They all look great. They can all do very well in Game Week 3. But as for the captaincy, I'd actually consider Isak at home to Tottenham. I think he'd be a great option. And I'd also look at Saka at home to Brighton. And you can't discount Erling Haaland, who scored a brace at the West Ham Stadium on his Premier League debut, and he scored in his last meeting there as well. The bench would be Lewis Hall, Rodgers and Barco. I'd probably put Rodgers first on my bench there, but as you can see, looking at future game weeks is very helpful in determining whether certain picks are really worth including from Game Week 1. And in Nkunku, for example, is a great pick that I might even go for at the very end, but I don't like him for Game Week 1 specifically, and I can always bring him in Game Week 2 or 3. But let's now move on to Drafthound. It's a great resource, and there is a link in the description below with so many resources at your disposal. My favourite feature in Drafthound is the player rankings. You can toggle things based on different factors. For example, expected points in the upcoming game week, where Haaland, Salah, Saka, Odegaard and Son make up the top 5, and these expected points are updated regularly. The same goes for the predicted lineups and everything else you see on Drafthound. Anthony Gordon, Isak and Trossard are also very highly rated in Game Week 1, so keep an eye out for those options. On the right, you can see my team as it's rated by Drafthound, and if you click on this green icon, it will give you suggestions in terms of captaincy, your bench order, and sometimes, if you wish, possible transfers to make with your team. So they recommend Haaland as the captain, with Saka as the vice, Barco first on the bench, Rodgers second, and Robinson in third. So very minute changes, you could argue, based on what I've done with my own team selection, but the captaincy is a major deal. As for the bench order, not so much, but it can also play a part from time to time. As I discussed in the Rating Your Teams videos on podcasts, always make sure you vice captain a very reliable pick and not just your goalkeeper, and always order your bench when possible. So that's it. That concludes my team selection for Game Week 1. It's not 100% locked in. There may be changes which I'll discuss in the deadline stream. I might even make some very late changes. I hope that's not the case. Overthinking is not something I would recommend. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's try to get this video to the 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, as well as Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It goes a long way to supporting my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 1 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.